monochromatic self-portraits. We're doing 2 of them. They're going to be in different emotions, and we're going to use color to further represent that emotion, because we've been talking about how color can represent moods, emotions, all that good stuff. So our first step is to transfer this picture. So I've already asked you guys to make a grid over your picture, your reference picture, so that we can then make another grid on our final drawing picture and we can transfer that image over there. I had asked you all to do 1/2-inch squares up and down. So I'm going to do that again real quick just to give you guys a refresher on what that looks like. I'm going to do it in pen just so you can see it easier. I'd recommend you do it in pencil just because mistakes happen. So I'm lining up my ruler with the edge of my picture, not with the edge of my paper, but with the edge of my picture. And every time I saw a 1/2 inch, I made a mark. So 1/2 inch, 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3. There's a little left over. It's okay, I don't even need that side anyways. And then the important part is to come to the bottom. So I went from up here and I went straight down. Did not move my ruler. And did the same thing. 1/2, 1, 1/2, 2, 2.5, 3, and I don't need that. Then I lined up the dot I just made with the second dot I just made and drew a line down. And I used my ruler for this whole process, so I have nice, accurate lines. Now the important part is to do the same size grid on the side as I have on the top. So laying this across the side now, I'm going to mark off every 1/2 inch just like before. 1/2, 1, 1/2, 2, etc. So I have my 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch grid. So you're going to be doing 2 of these. I already did my second one just to move ahead of the game. So I got my 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch squares here. So now I need to move these pictures to my final image. So these are both going to go on this one paper. I just need to split it in 2 and they'll go side by side. So 18 divided by 2 is 9. So I am going to use my ruler, and this time I'm using a pencil. This is important because we are going to be erasing these grid lines eventually, so we don't want to do it in pen at all. We want to do it in very light pencil marks. So I'm going to measure from the edge 9 inches in, that's halfway through. On the bottom I'm going to measure 9 inches, and then I'm going to connect them to have a separation between my 2 images. So now I have one image will be here and one image will be here. So 9 by 12. So I need to fit my picture into a 9 by 12. So if I count, I have about 6 squares by 11. I do not need to keep all of these squares. For example, down here, I don't really even need this. I want it to be focused on the face, so I can cut some of that off. So I'm going to focus on the width. I have 6 squares across that need to fit into 9 inches. So, hey Google, what's 9 divided by 6?
The answer is 1.5.
Okay, so that sounds like the best option for us to do our grid. So this is a 1/2 inch grid. I'm going to do the grid on here, a 1.5 inch grid. So measuring it up here, same method, but instead of doing 1/2 inch, I'm going to measure every 1.5 inch. So 1.5, 3, 4.5, 6, 7.5, 9. Same thing on the bottom. Now the important thing is to continue the same size grid on the side. So I did it 1.5 inches this way. I'm going to do 1.5 inches the full length of the side as well. Okay, so I have 6 by 8 squares to choose. So I chose all these are all the 6, and then I chose 1 through 8. So the top of my head through top of my sweater because I don't need that anyways. And then up here, I just labeled them A through F to make it a little bit easier to distinguish. So I'll go to my grid and I'll write A through F and 1 through 8. So now I have the tools to transfer this picture onto my grid. I do that by looking at the squares that I want to transfer. So for example, I'll go to C4. That's right here. And I'm going to look at everything that is in just that C4 square. So I'm not worrying about the whole face. I'm just going to draw what's in that square onto my C4 square here. So I'm looking at just that little box instead of having to look at the whole face at once. Okay, so I have that set for this image. I am going to make the same grid over here for my second image, and I'll do the same thing where I go through and choose which squares I want to keep so I can fit it into my 6 by 8 inch grid that I made up here. So same thing, I'm measuring 1.5 inches for all of my squares up here. So 1.5 inches all the way across. I'm going to label this just like I did over here before I get confused. So starting with A and then through F. So my new picture will start here. The old one ends here, new one starts there, just so things are easier. Now I can go through and measure 1.5 inches again. Since I already have this line on this side, I'm just going to use that to connect to this side. So 1.5 all the way down. And label. Now from these, again, I have 6 through 8, so I'm going to choose 6 through 8 squares. So since this is a smaller picture, I only have 4 squares, so I can just put this image within these 4 squares here. So I'm just going to label mine B, C, D, E. That way it's in the middle. So now these are all included in my 6 inches across, and then I'm going to choose 8 of these down. So my 8 extend from the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I'm getting everything in this spot, which is going to make this easy. So I'm going to go ahead now and draw my boxes onto here by looking at each individual box. So that, for example, is C5. I'll go to C5 on here and draw what I see just in that box. I'm going to do that for both my pictures, and then we're ready to start coloring. It's not going to look exactly like your picture. I mean, you notice it doesn't look perfectly aligned because you're going from a realistic picture that doesn't have actual lines on it. It just has shadows and highlights, and you're making it into a bunch of lines. So it's not going to look perfect just yet, but once we get the shadows, highlights in there, once we start coloring and shading, it's going to start looking more accurate. So you notice I did very light lines. I'm not pushing hard because I want to erase those eventually, and I just did the basic outlines of things. I'm not shading just yet. So I have my first drawing. I'm going to go do my second drawing using the same method, and then we have our first step done, and we can eventually move on to step 2, which will be in our next video. So good luck, have fun, take your time when you make the grid. It'll make drawing super easy as long as your grids are accurate. So let's finish this off for step 1. So this is 18 inches across, so 18 divided by 2 is 8. Oh my God,